She stood at the edge of the glittering ballroom, a glass of warm champagne untouched in her hand, and watched her husband smile at a letter that was not meant for her eyes. The Duke of Ashworth never smiled. Not at morning tea, not across the dinner table, not on the rare nights he remembered she existed in the vast, echoing halls of Thornwood Hall. But tonight, beneath the crystal chandeliers of Lord Hempstead's London townhouse, Lucian Ashworth stood apart from the dancers, his broad shoulders angled toward a marble pillar, and he smiled. The letter trembled slightly in his gloved fingers. His thumb traced the edge of the paper as if it were precious, as if it were a living thing. Ilara's chest tightened. She did not need to ask who had written it. The entire ton knew. They whispered about it behind fans and gloved hands. The Duke of Ashworth had been in love with Lady Marguerite de Lacourt since they were young. She was beautiful, French on her mother's side, with hair the color of spun gold and a laugh that made men forget their own names. She had married a Prussian prince 5 years ago, just weeks before Lucian's father had forced him into an alliance with Ilara's family. A marriage of convenience, a marriage of land and debt and silent desperation. Ilara had known all of this on her wedding day. She had stood at the altar in ivory silk, her heart full of foolish, girlish hope, and she had told herself that time would soften him, that she could be patient, that love could grow from duty. 3 years later, she knew she had been wrong. Now she stood in a corner of the ballroom while the other guests avoided her eyes. They saw what she saw. The Duke, cold as winter stone, transformed by a piece of paper from a woman an ocean away. Ilara's fingers tightened around the crystal glass. A young debutante nearby whispered behind her fan, and the words floated to Ilara like poison on the air. Poor Duchess Ashworth, he has not looked at her once tonight. Can you blame him? She is so plain. Ilara's throat burned. She set the champagne on a passing tray and walked toward the terrace, her spine straight, her slippers silent on the polished floor. She did not run. A duchess never ran, but she felt the weight of every stair like stones on her shoulders. Outside, the night air was cool and smelled of rain. She gripped the stone balustrade and stared at the darkened garden below. The stars were hidden behind clouds. The music from inside drifted through the open doors, a waltz she would never dance. She closed her eyes and pressed her palm against her chest, where the ache had made a permanent home. She had promised herself she would not cry tonight. She had worn the emerald gown because someone once told her it brought out the green in her gray eyes. She had pinned her dark hair with pearl combs that belonged to her mother. She had smiled at the mirror and whispered, "Tonight will be different." But nothing was ever different. When she opened her eyes, a single tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, furious at her own weakness. She had been waiting for love that would never come, and she was exhausted. She did not know how long she stood there. Long enough for the music to change, for the laughter inside to swell and fade. Then she heard footsteps behind her, and her heart lurched with a hope she immediately despised. It was not her husband. Lady Catherine Ashworth, Lucian's younger sister, stepped onto the terrace in a gown of pale lavender. Her face was sharp and beautiful, her smile thin. She had never approved of Ilara. She made that clear every time they were in the same room. "Duchess," Catherine said, the title dripping with false sweetness. "Hiding already, the evening is still young." Ilara turned, her mask slipping into place. "I needed air." Catherine tilted her head. "Of course, it must be so difficult for you. All these people, all this noise, and my brother. Well, he is rather distracted tonight, is he not?" She let the words hang, a blade wrapped in silk. "I did try to warn him. Letters from Marguerite always unsettle him. She writes so beautifully. He keeps everyone, you know, in a locked drawer in his study." Ilara's stomach turned to ice. She had not known. She had never entered his study. It was the one room in Thornwood Hall that was entirely his. She had respected that boundary because she thought it was her duty. Now she understood the truth. The room was a shrine. She kept her voice steady. "Thank you for telling me, Catherine. You are always so thoughtful." Catherine's eyes flickered with surprise, then narrowed. She had expected tears, perhaps, or a sharp retort she could carry back to the gossips. Ilara gave her neither. She simply inclined her head and walked back into the ballroom, her heart a hollow drum. She did not look for Lucien. She did not wait for the carriage. She found her cloak and asked a footman to summon a hired hackney. She rode home alone through the dark streets of London, the leather seat cold beneath her, and she made a decision in the silence. She would stop. She would stop hopping for his smile, stop seeking his approval, stop twisting herself into shapes she thought he might one day love. She would become the Duchess she was meant to be, not for him but for herself. The next morning, Ilara rose before dawn and went to the kitchens. Mrs. Harlow, the cook, nearly dropped a tray of scones when the Duchess walked in and asked to review the household accounts. No Duchess had ever done that at Thornwood Hall. The estate had been run by stewards and solicitors for years, ever since the old Duke died and Lucien retreated into his shell of cold duty. The house was efficient but soulless. The tenants in the village struggled. Ilara had noticed these things in passing, but had never felt it was her place to interfere. Now she decided it was. She spent the morning in the estate office, poring over ledgers until her eyes ached. She found discrepancies, small ones, the kind that spoke of neglect rather than theft. She wrote letters to the steward, requesting reports on crop yields and roof repairs. She ordered new blankets for the almshouse. She did not ask for permission. She simply acted. When Lucien returned from London 2 days later, he found his wife seated at the desk in the morning room, a pile of correspondence in front of her and ink on her fingers. He paused in the doorway, his dark coat still dusty from the road. He was tall, his face all sharp angles and shadowed eyes, his presence so commanding that even now Ilara's heart gave a traitorous flutter. She looked up and offered a calm, polite smile. "Welcome home, Your Grace. I trust your journey was pleasant." He blinked. Something in her tone was different. She was not rushing to him, not searching his face for crumbs of affection. She was, still, composed, distant. "It was adequate," he said slowly. "What are you doing?" "Reviewing the estate accounts. I discovered that the West Tenant farms have been without proper drainage for 2 seasons. I have arranged for a surveyor to visit next week." Lucien's brow furrowed. "You arranged that?" "Yes, unless you have an objection." He stared at her for a long moment. She met his gaze without flinching. Something flickered in his dark eyes, confusion perhaps, or a faint ripple of unease. Then he gave a short nod. "No objection." He turned and walked away, his boots echoing on the marble floor. Ilara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were trembling, but she did not let herself cry. This was the first day of her new life. It did not feel like freedom yet. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But at least the wind was fresh, and she was finally looking forward instead of back. Weeks passed. Spring melted into early summer. Ilara became a quiet force in the estate. She visited tenants, listened to their troubles, sat in smoky cottages and held calloused hands. She organized repairs, planted a kitchen garden for the village, and began hosting weekly sewing circles for the local women. She did not do these things for praise. She did them because they filled the hours and gave her mind somewhere to go that was not the locked drawer in Lucien's study. He noticed the changes. How could he not? The house smelled of fresh flowers now. The servants moved with a new lightness. Even his steward, a gruff old man named Mr. Pemberton, admitted that the Duchess had a sharp eye for numbers. But Lucien did not know how to speak of these things. Words had never been his gift. So he watched from windows, from doorways, from the far end of the dinner table while she ate in silence, her attention fixed on a book or a letter from a tenant farmer. At first he was relieved. Her earlier attempts to draw him into conversation had always felt like needles under his skin. Her eager, hopeful face had made him feel guilty in ways he could not name. Now she asked for nothing. She smiled at him with polite detachment and excused herself early. The house was peaceful. But peace, he began to realize, felt disturbingly close to emptiness. One evening, he returned from a ride to find the drawing room lit by candles and the sound of laughter drifting through the open windows. His boots slowed on the gravel path. Laughter was rare in Thornwood Hall. He could not remember the last time he had heard it. He stepped through the French doors and stopped. Alara sat on the settee, her dark hair loose over one shoulder, her cheeks flushed with amusement. Beside her, in the chair closest to the fire, sat Sir William Ashby. William was a baronet from a neighboring estate, a man Lucian had known since childhood. He was affable, golden-haired, and blessed with the easy charm Lucian had never possessed. At that moment, he was leaning forward, telling some story that made Alara's eyes sparkle. And then the horse bolted straight through the market, with me clinging to its neck like a drowned cat, William said, spreading his hands. I have never seen a fishmonger move so fast. Alara laughed. The sound was bright and musical, and it struck Lucian directly in the chest. He had never made her laugh, not once in 3 years. She looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. The laughter faded from her face, replaced by that calm, pleasant mask. "Your Grace, I did not hear you come in. Sir William was kind enough to call. He has been advising me on the new irrigation system for the East Fields." William rose and bowed. "Ashworth, your wife is a marvel. She has done more for this estate in 2 months than most landowners manage in a decade." Lucian's jaw tightened. The easy warmth between them was a language he could not speak. He gave a stiff nod. "I am aware of her efforts." The words came out colder than he intended. Alara's expression did not change. "Shall I ring for tea, Your Grace?" "No, I have work to do." He turned and left, his pulse beating an unfamiliar rhythm. Jealousy, he told himself, was irrational. He had no claim to her laughter. He had never asked for it. But the image of William leaning close, of Alara's unguarded smile, stayed with him long into the night. He sat in his study, the locked drawer of letters untouched before him, and felt the walls of his carefully constructed indifference begin to crack. The first emotional reveal came on a rain-soaked afternoon in late June. Alara was in the library, cataloging a collection of old books that had been gathering dust for decades. She had discovered a trove of first editions in a forgotten corner and had taken it upon herself to restore them. It was quiet, solitary work, and she loved it. A footman entered and announced that a courier had arrived with an urgent letter for the Duke. Lucian was out inspecting the drainage work. The footman did not know what to do. Alara took the letter, intending to place it on Lucian's desk, and that was when she saw the seal, a Prussian eagle. Her heart clenched. She knew she should not open it. She knew. But the memory of Catherine's cruel words echoed in her mind, and her hands moved before her mind could stop them. She broke the wax seal and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant, looping, feminine. The words were in French. Alara's French was rusty, but she understood enough. "Mon cher Lucien, I find myself in a difficult position. My husband's political enemies are closing in. I need your influence in the House of Lords to protect certain trade agreements. You once promised you would do anything for me. I am calling upon that promise now. Please do not fail me. I remain always your devoted Marguerite." Alara's fingers went numb. She read the letter twice, 3 times. There was no affection in it, no longing, no trace of the great love story the Tun whispered about. It was a cold, calculated request for political assistance, wrapped in the memory of a man's devotion. Lucian had spent 5 years loving a woman who saw him as a tool to be used. The revelation did not bring Alara satisfaction. It brought a strange, aching sorrow. He had been trapped too in his own way, a prisoner of a love that had never truly existed. She carefully refolded the letter and placed it on his desk, her hand steady. She did not confront him. She did not mention it, but something inside her shifted. She pitied him now. And pity, she knew, was the final death of romantic hope. When Lucian found the letter that evening, Alara was in the garden cutting roses for the dinner table. She heard nothing from the house for a long while. Then, as twilight settled, she saw a flicker of orange light from the study window. Curious, she walked closer and saw him standing before the hearth, feeding papers into the flames. The locked drawer was open, empty. He burned the letters one by one, his face a mask of stone. The light caught the glisten of moisture on his cheek, though he made no sound. Alara stepped back into the shadows. She did not go to him. She had spent 3 years offering comfort he never wanted. She would not humiliate herself again. But her heart ached, and she realized that watching him suffer did not heal her own wounds. It only reminded her how much damage love could do when it was one-sided. The following week, the Duke fell ill. It began as a cough, the kind that often swept through the countryside in wet summers. But by the 3rd day, Lucien was burning with fever, confined to his bed, his breath coming in shallow rasps. The physician diagnosed inflammation of the lungs and ordered rest, fluids, and careful watching. The household fell into a hush of fear. A dukedom could crumble if the duke died without an heir. The staff moved like ghosts. Alara did not hesitate. She took command of the sick room with the same quiet authority she had brought to the estate. She sent for the best medicines London could offer. She sat by his bedside through the long, delirious nights, sponging his forehead with cool water, listening to his fevered ramblings. He spoke names she did not know. Sometimes he called for his mother, who had died when he was a boy. Sometimes he murmured apologies to shadows. Once he gripped her hand so tightly it bruised and whispered, "Please don't leave me." She did not know if he spoke to her or to the ghost of Marguerite. It did not matter. She stayed, not because she still hoped for his love, but because it was the right thing to do. Because she was the Duchess of Ashworth, and she had learned to carry her own pain without letting it poison her decency. On the 7th night, the fever broke. Lucien opened his eyes to a gray dawn and found his wife asleep in the armchair beside his bed, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her face pale with exhaustion. He stared at her for a long moment, the fog of illness slowly lifting. He remembered fragments, cool hands on his forehead, a soft voice reading aloud from a book of poetry, the scent of lavender, the steady, unshakable presence of her. Something cracked open inside his chest. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw. He reached out and touched her hand. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him awake, alert, the relief that flooded her face was not the desperate relief of a woman in love. It was the calm, steady relief of a woman who had done her duty and was glad to see it through. She smiled, a small, tired smile. "Welcome back, Your Grace." He swallowed. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." She rose and poured him a glass of water, holding it to his lips. "You are my husband. I would not abandon you." My husband. The words were simple. They should have been meaningless after 3 years of legal bonds. But to Lucien in that moment, they felt like a gift he had done nothing to earn. He had been married to her for over 1,000 days, and he realized with gut-wrenching clarity that he did not know her at all. He knew her favorite color was green because he had seen her wear it often. He knew she took her tea without sugar. He knew she had a habit of biting her lip when she was nervous. But he did not know what made her laugh. He did not know what she dreamed of. He did not know if she had ever loved someone before him, or if she had married him with hope in her heart, only to watch it wither. He had never asked. The guilt was a physical weight on his ribs. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I am sorry." Alara paused, the water glass still in her hand. "For what?" "For everything." She set the glass down and smoothed the blanket over his chest. "Rest now. We can speak when you are stronger." It was not forgiveness. It was not even acknowledgement. It was a gentle, firm dismissal, and he deserved it. He recovered slowly. The physician said he was fortunate. Another few hours of fever and the outcome might have been different. Alara continued to run the estate, her days full of purpose. She did not resume her vigil by his bedside once he was out of danger. She visited, asked after his health, and then excused herself to attend to some task. She was never unkind. She was simply elsewhere. Lucien noticed. He noticed everything now. The way she laughed with the gardener's son when he brought her a handful of wildflowers. The way she sat with the housekeeper, Mrs. Trent, and patiently taught her to read. The way Sir William Ashby's visits became more frequent, his carriage rattling up the drive every few days. The way Alara's eyes would light up when William entered, a light that never appeared when Lucian walked into a room. Jealousy, once a flicker, became a steady, burning flame. One afternoon he found them in the rose garden. William was helping Alara plant a new variety of white rose, his sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands. They were laughing, their heads bent close together. Something in Lucian snapped. He strode across the lawn, his boots crushing the grass, and stopped before them. "Sir William," he said, his voice like ice, "I was not aware you had become a gardener." William straightened, his expression wary. "Merely assisting the Duchess. She has a vision for this garden and I have 2 strong arms. Thornwood has gardeners for that." Alara looked up, her calm eyes meeting his. "I enjoy the work myself, Your Grace, and Sir William has been a great help these past weeks. I would be lost without him." Lost without him. The words cut deeper than any blade. Lucian's hands clenched at his sides. "I see." William, sensing the tension, bowed and excused himself. When they were alone, the silence was heavy with unspoken things. Alara brushed the soil from her gloves. "Is something wrong? You have grown very close to Ashby. He has been a good friend. Is that all he is?" She paused, studying his face. Then she laughed, a soft, humorless sound. "Are you asking me if I have dishonored our marriage, Lucian?" It was the first time she had used his given name in months. "I have not, but I find it curious that you care after all this time." He had no answer. She was right. He had given her no reason to believe he cared about anything she did. He had built a wall of ice between them, brick by brick, and now he was standing on the wrong side, watching her walk away toward a man who made her smile. "I do care," he said, the words rough and foreign on his tongue. Alara tilted her head. "Do you, or do you simply dislike seeing someone else appreciate what you have ignored?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She waited a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward the house, leaving him alone among the roses. That night, the second emotional reveal shattered what remained of his denial. Alara had left a small, leather-bound journal on the window seat in the library. She had been writing in it earlier and must have forgotten it there. Lucian found it when he went to retrieve a book he had left behind. He knew he should not open it. He did it anyway. The pages were filled with her handwriting, elegant, looping letters that spoke of a well-educated mind. The early entries were dated from the first year of their marriage. They were full of hope, of tentative joy, of prayers that he might one day see her. She wrote about the way his voice made her heart race. She wrote about the first time he smiled at her, a fleeting thing over the breakfast table, and how she had treasured it for days. Then the entries changed. The hope faded, replaced by confusion, then resignation. And then, near the middle of the journal, he found an entry that stopped his breath. "Today I learned that he keeps her letters locked away. Catherine told me with a smile that could cut glass. I feel so foolish. I have been competing with a ghost I cannot see. I wonder if I will ever be enough. I wonder if I was ever anything more than a signature on a contract. There is a locket around my neck that holds a lock of my mother's hair and a tiny portrait of the boy I loved before I was a duchess. His name was Thomas. He died of a fever when I was 17. I have never told Lucian. I thought I could bury that grief beneath new love. But there is no new love here, only silence. I carry 2 dead men in my heart now, Thomas, who loved me, and my husband, who never will." Lucian's hands shook. He sank into the window seat, the journal open in his lap. She had loved someone, she had lost him, and she had come to their marriage carrying a grief he had never bothered to see because he had been too consumed with his own. All the years he had thought her simply an unwanted bride, a duty he had to endure. She had been a woman with a shattered heart, trying to heal, hoping he would be the one to help her. And he had failed her at every turn. The fear of loss was no longer a distant possibility. It was a cold, immediate terror. He realized with the force of a river breaking a dam that he loved her. He loved the way she had transformed the estate, loved her quiet strength, loved the rare sound of her laugh. He loved her patience, her dignity, her refusal to crumble, and he had thrown it all away. He closed the journal and pressed it to his forehead, a man drowning in regret. The next morning he went to her. She was in the morning room, writing letters to suppliers for the new village school she was helping to establish. She looked up when he entered, and something in his expression made her set down her pen. "Lucien, are you unwell?" He crossed the room and knelt before her chair. It was an act no duke performed. It was an act of surrender. She stared at him, shock parting her lips. "I read your journal," he said, his voice hoarse. "I should not have, but I did, and I know now what I should have known 3 years ago." Alara's face paled. "You read my private." "I know about Thomas." His eyes were wet. "I know you came to me with a heart that was already bruised. I know you tried to love me. I know I gave you nothing in return but cold silence and a locked drawer full of foolish letters to a woman who never loved me." He reached for her hand. She did not pull away, but she did not hold him back. "I have been a blind fool. I did not see you. I did not see the strength it took for you to stay, but I see it now. I see you, Alara. And I am terrified that I have seen it too late." A tear slipped down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because another man noticed me. Because you almost died and felt the cold touch of mortality. Why should I believe that this change is real?" "Because I have no right to ask you to believe it," he said. "Because I have given you nothing but reasons to doubt. But I am asking, begging for a chance to prove it. Not with words, with time, with actions. I will spend the rest of my life earning what I should have given you freely from the beginning." She looked at him for a long, searching moment. The sunlight caught the silver streaks in his dark hair, the lines of illness still faint on his face. He was not the invincible duke she had married. He was a man, broken and afraid, kneeling before her with his heart in his hands. "I do not know if I can love you again," she said, her voice trembling. "I spent so long learning not to feel anything for you. I built walls too." "Then let me sit beside those walls," he said. "Let me stay. I will not demand anything. I will not expect anything. Just let me be near you." It was not a confession of passion. It was not a declaration that would echo through ballrooms. It was a quiet, desperate plea from a man who had finally understood the cost of indifference. Alara closed her eyes, the silence stretched, and then slowly she placed her other hand over his. "I will try," she said, "but it will take time." "I have time," he said, his voice breaking on a sob, "all the time in the world." The healing did not happen overnight. Lucien began to court his own wife with a tenderness that surprised everyone, himself most of all. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, not hothouse roses. He sat with her in the library and asked her about her day, and he listened, truly listened, to her answers. He joined her on her visits to the tenants and carried baskets of food. He discovered that she had a sharp wit and a deep knowledge of history and a secret fondness for chocolate biscuits. He discovered that she hummed when she was content and bit her lip when she was worried. He discovered 1,000 small, beautiful things he had been too blind to notice. He also discovered the weight of his own guilt. Some nights, he lay awake, remembering the look on her face in the ballroom all those months ago, the way she had stood alone while he smiled at a letter. He would never forgive himself for that, but he could use that guilt as fuel to become the husband she deserved. Alara watched his efforts with cautious hope. She did not trust easily anymore. She had been burned too deeply. But she saw the change in his eyes, the way they sought her out across a room, the way they softened when she smiled. She saw him dismiss Catherine's sharp comments with a cold finality that left his sister speechless. She saw him lock his study door and spend his evenings in the drawing room with her instead. One evening, as autumn painted the trees gold and crimson, they walked together through the rose garden. The white roses she had planted with William were blooming. William had stopped visiting. He had seen the shift between the Duke and Duchess and had quietly, gracefully withdrawn. Alara was grateful for his friendship but did not mourn its fading. Her heart was learning to make room for something new. Lucian stopped by the white roses and touched a petal. "These are beautiful." "They are a symbol of new beginnings," Alara said. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I know I have no right to ask this, but I need to know. Do you think you could ever love me? Not the Duke, not the title, just me." She looked at him, this stern, flawed, complicated man who had broken her heart and then knelt to pick up the pieces. The man who had burned his letters and turned his face toward the future. "I think," she said slowly, "that I already do, not the way I did before. That love was a girl's dream. This is quieter, deeper. It is the love of a woman who has seen the worst and chosen to hope anyway." Lucian's breath caught. He stepped forward and cupped her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. "I will spend every day making sure you never regret that hope." He kissed her forehead, her closed eyelids, the tip of her nose. And then, with a reverence that spoke of months of longing, he kissed her lips. It was soft and unhurried, a promise more than a passion. When they pulled apart, Alara was smiling, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it 1,000 times before. I love you, Alara, I love you." She placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "I know, I love you too." The evening settled around them like a warm blanket. In the distance, the lights of Thornwood Hall glowed softly, no longer a cold monument but a home. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full. Full of all the words they had finally spoken and all the days that stretched ahead, waiting to be lived. And in the garden, beneath the white roses of new beginnings, the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth began again.